It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Actually, this is Valentine's Day. Welcome to Valentine's Day in Minnesota.
Welcome to the dark side of the planet.
Valentine's Day has always been a celebration of romantic love, named in honor of a Roman priest we remember as Saint Valentine. But changes in the social climate in recent years have brought a chilling effect to the warm fuzzies of Valentine's Day. There arose a movement to rename it V-Day, the V standing for a woman's reproductive organ. It wasn't men who wanted to focus on a woman's reproductive organ, it was women. And this came as a surprise to me after years of hearing women say that they didn't want to be objectified, that there was more to them than just their bodies. Now suddenly here was a generation of women who wanted everybody to think about their, well, as the British would say, the naughty bits. So how did we get here? From hundreds of years of romantic love to suddenly maximized objectification of the body. Take a close look at this model car I have sitting in the background. It's a 1965 Chevrolet Chevelle station wagon. Station wagons were popular if you had a large family, or if you had a lot of camping gear to haul around. Up until that time, romance and families had pretty much stayed the same over the centuries. But then came the Woodstock generation, and I've talked about them before in my Woodstock video. That was the people just ahead of me, just a few years ahead of me. And for them it was all about self-realization, self-fulfillment, self-gratification. The common phrases I heard when I was about 10 years old were, let it all hang out, do your own thing, be yourself. If it feels good, do it. Do you remember your first crush? I remember the first girl I noticed. I don't know if it was a crush or not, but I liked her. I was at a babysitter's house, and the babysitter had a daughter named Robin. I was about 5 years old, I think, and I think Robin was 4. And first of all, Robin was nice to me. Also, I noticed Robin had bangs. And I liked her little face. And I noticed how long her eyelashes looked when she looked down at the floor while she played with her toys. Unfortunately, the only other thing I remember about Robin was that she had a way of running into the kitchen every now and then and sticking her finger in the cookie dough while her mom was trying to bake cookies and sticking the dough in her mouth and eating it. And I remember thinking, ew! Why would you want to eat that goopy stuff? Wait till she bakes it into cookies. Now around that same time, I learned, indirectly and by accident, that girls aren't biologically the same as boys. I mean, I noticed that they had longer hair, and sometimes their faces were smaller, but that was all I knew until one day I was in kindergarten. Our kindergarten room had a bathroom just for us kindergartners. I suppose they didn't want the kindergartners to have to go down the stairs and use the same bathroom as everybody else. And that bathroom door had a sign hanging on the doorknob. One side of the sign was red and it said stop. The other side of the sign was green and it said go. Well, I don't remember if I didn't notice the sign or if the girl in the bathroom forgot to turn the sign, but I opened the door and saw a girl sitting on the toilet. Now back then girls wore dresses and skirts all the time, and so this girl was sitting on the toilet with her skirt draped over the toilet. And she just looked at me like, why are you here? And I thought, oh, I'm sorry. And I closed the door. But I walked away thinking, wow, girls don't have to pull down their pants to use the bathroom. That must be nice. And so that was interesting to me. And so I went home and I told Mom about that incident. And she said, don't walk into the bathroom while a girl's using the bathroom. And she explained to me that they don't have the same kind of equipment that I had for going to the bathroom. And that was all she told me. That was all she wanted me to know at that time. And I didn't ask any more questions. Number one, I was not a why kid. Number two, I could tell by Mom's tone of voice that that wasn't a comfortable subject for her to talk about. And so that was all I knew. The girls didn't use the same kind of thing to pee with. And I didn't know any more for years. It was easier to keep a child innocent back then because there was no internet, and television adhered to what they called the television code. They wanted to keep children innocent. Nobody thought that children needed to know that stuff until they were old enough to start approaching puberty. And during that time, I had crushes on a few other girls. I remember one girl had the biggest brown eyes I had ever seen. And I looked at her every now and then. And evidently she noticed I was looking at her, because at one point she looked back at me and smiled and bobbed her head at me, and I just about fell over backwards. There is, and always has been, so much more to affection and attraction between the opposite sexes than just sex itself. The fantasies that I had about the girls I had crushes on were of rescuing them. A girl was in trouble, I would come with my mighty muscles and save her, and she would hug me and maybe kiss me. I'd seen Popeye do it over and over again with olive oil. That was my role model. Popeye was always saving olive oil. That's what you did for someone that you cared about. In the 1970s, there was a 1-hour comedy called Love American Style. Now, it had no main characters. It was just a series of romantic comedy vignettes. Several of the actors that appeared were well known. You knew who the actors were, but they played a different part every time. The only consistent character in Love American Style was a big brass bed. Kind of like Bob Dylan sang about, "Lay, lady, lay across my big brass bed." And the term making love was used a lot. Now, I was in my early teens, and I was able to figure out, even though it was tastefully filmed, the television code was still intact, I understood what making love was supposed to refer to. It had to do with that bed. And then later on, I was watching an old Laurel and Hardy movie, and Stan Laurel got my attention when they were figuring out what to do with a man that was causing them trouble. And Stan Laurel says, "I know, make love to his wife and make him jealous." And I thought, okay, now what is Stan Laurel talking about? I know they didn't do that back in the Laurel and Hardy movies. And so Oliver Hardy takes Stan's advice and sits down on a park bench by the man's wife and says flattering things to her. In 1987, Steve Martin decided to do an update of the play Cyrano de Bergerac. It was a movie called Roxanne. And Steve Martin played a fire chief based on Cyrano de Bergerac. Now, Cyrano de Bergerac was a man who was very witty, very romantic, very talented, but had a great big nose. And he was attracted to this beautiful lady named Roxanne, but he was afraid he was too ugly to ever get to marry her. So when he finds out she's interested in a friend of his, he writes letters expressing his feelings for Roxanne and signs the other man's name on it. And long story short, in the original story, it wound up in Cyrano's friend and Roxanne getting married. However, in the movie Roxanne, things took a different turn. For instance, when he's talking to his friend, he says, "How did you feel the first time you saw her?" And his friend said, "Horny." At that point, the movie departed woefully from the 1897 play. After that, he shames her, C.D. Bales, that is, the modern version of Cyrano de Bergerac, and then later on he humiliates her. The bright side of the movie Roxanne over the original play is that C.D. Bales doesn't die at the end of the play. One of my favorite sitcoms to watch as a young boy was Get Smart on Saturday nights. It starred Don Adams and Barbara Feldon. In 2008, Hollywood came out with a remake of Get Smart starring Steve Carell and Anne Hathaway. Now, when I saw that it was Anne Hathaway playing 99, I thought, yeah, that's a good choice. She's pretty enough to be 99. But when I saw the movie, I didn't think she was that pretty because she always had this honked-off look on her face. She was an angry, used-up woman with a secret past. Now, the 99 in the TV sitcom was just sweet. She was so good to Max. A lot of us were just amazed. I thought, how can Maxwell Smart be so stupid and 99 still loves him? Boy, he's lucky. If there's a lady like 99 that would love Maxwell Smart, then there's hope for me. And Barbara Feldon was asked what she thought about the 2008 remake of Get Smart, and she said, I enjoyed it. But it wasn't the same as the TV series. It couldn't be. That was a more innocent time. Get Smart debuted in 1965. This is a Valentine's card I'm going to give to my wife. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, just a little snippet. You're more than my wife. You're the one I want to unwind with at the end of a hectic day. This is God's Valentine to you. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, just a little snippet. Love is patient, love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly, it does not seek its own, it is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. That was from 1 Corinthians 13 in the New American Standard Bible Translation. And there's a whole lot more about love than that. That was just a snippet. God loves you. Thanks for watching.